Thanks for joining us on the Inside Track on Real Estate with the Decker team. I'm Yetta Decker, and today I'm here with Paul Battle, the house doc.
Hi.
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm very good. Yourself?
Excellent. Good. Always good when I'm chatting with somebody that can educate and help our clients to make better decisions about houses. And that's what you're about, right?
That's what I'm about.
So the house doc. Tell me, Paul, how did you get into the industry in the first place?
Well, this is 18 years I've been doing this. And prior to doing this, I was an outdoor instructor, and I worked seasonally in different parts of the country. And one of the areas was in Florida. Right. And down in the Florida, the amount of humidity in the summertime is excessively high, and I worked for an organization that was a not-for-profit, and they closed the buildings up in the summertime. So in the winter, when we would go down, there would be mold growing on the side of the walls. We would have to fumigate the buildings every couple of years for termites. And with that, my spouse developed sensitivities, and some for myself as well.
Wow. So did you just paint over the mold, or what did you do to address them?
Yeah,
when
back
you
then
saw
I was
it there?
painting over mold and fumigating with pesticides.
And then it came back.
You'd move, yeah, well, the next season it would come back, sure.
And it was already still there, I guess. The paint, did it actually...
No, it doesn't really completely
just makes it look good?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So good-looking mold rather than bad-looking mold.
Yeah, so there was a need to have to learn how to create a healthy environment, because we couldn't work in that environment anymore.
And I understand, if I can remember the story from years ago when you first got into the industry, it made your wife very sick.
Yeah, people with chemical sensitivities or environmental sensitivities can't tolerate going into a store, tobacco smoke, formaldehyde on new cotton clothing. So every little thing they're...
Formaldehyde on cotton clothing?
Yeah, brand new clothing is always sprayed with formaldehyde as a preservative.
Seriously?
Seriously. So every time if you buy something that's cotton and it's non-organic, it will have a formaldehyde spray on it.
Wow, and linens, I guess, would be the same thing?
Yep.
Silks, any of the natural fibers?
Yeah, we bring all these things inside our house.
Nice.
Yeah.
Not so nice.
No.
Okay, so you're going to get an education today, because I'm getting one already. So as you're in this line of business, what is the house doc? What does he do?
Well, you know, if you think about my business name, the house doc, when I first started, my business was called Enviornments. Okay. And I was working through naturopaths and naturopathic doctors and environmental physicians, and people started calling me and on the phone. They say, "Oh, you're the house doctor," because I go in, I diagnose the problem, and I prescribe a cure for it. So over 3 or 4 years, everybody was calling me the house doctor. So I just decided to change my business name, and I'll become, well, somebody already had the website, The House Doctor, so I took The House Doc.
Okay, so remember that, thehousedoc.ca.
Yeah.
Right? Do you have .com as well, or?
No, .ca.
Okay, thehousedoc.ca, primarily in Ottawa?
Primarily in Ottawa. I go down to Cornwall regularly, Kingston, kind of a 2-hour circle around
Okay,
Ottawa.
and onto the Quebec side?
And onto the Quebec side as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you can help just about anybody with anything from an environmental perspective that's in a house.
Yeah, primarily indoor air quality issues. So I'm not doing environmental site assessments for commercial buildings.
Okay,
because I sometimes
It's not soil.
It's not soil inspection and history of the building. It's strictly towards residential indoor air quality health.
Okay, and do you do any commercial indoor air quality as well?
I do a small amount. I don't advertise for it, but I have people that I've worked with in the past that will call me.
So your previous clients, you're going to serve them the best you can. If they now are buying a secondary property or something and it's a little bit bigger, then you'll be there for them too. Yeah,
exactly. Or some of the larger buildings in Canada. I've done a lot of commercial stuff for big stuff. Yeah.
So mold is going to be the topic or focus of our show today. And then if you're watching this show today or listening, because you know you can listen to it at chri.ca or on air 99.1 Fridays at 9:30, or watch them on deckerteam.com. And I guess it'll also be aired at thehousedoc.ca, so they'll be able to find it there so that people can get the information, a link for that. And so if they're, we'll do another show as well. So we'll cover some other aspects. So you may be watching the other one first or this one first or whatever. And if there's other topics relative to the quality or air quality in a house that you'd like to be aired, I might be able to convince Paul to come back. What do you think?
If I'm not that busy, yes.
It's always about how many people need his help. The doc's got to do his service calls first before he does the educational piece on air. All right, so mold. How dangerous is mold?
Well, it's the first thing you have to realize about mold is that it's in the air all the time. So as we're breathing now, we're breathing mold spores. This building doesn't have a mold issue.
Right.
It's just that mold spores are in the air. So
they're everywhere.
They're everywhere. So that's the first thing to realize, because people will call me and say, I don't want any mold in my house. Well, mold it comes in every time we open the windows, every time we walk in from outside. If I'm testing the mold activity in a house with air tests, I'm going to test outside to compare the two and see, are they the similar types of mold, are the similar counts, or the counts should be lower. So
lower inside or lower outside?
Lower inside. We're not going to do that outside comparison when there's snow or when there's high amounts of rain, because that's going to change the counts outside. So in the wintertime, we don't do an outside control. But so in terms of being dangerous, it really depends on the amount of mold that's present. It depends on the type of molds, and it depends on the person's own constitution, whether they have upper respiratory allergies or whether they have chemical sensitivities, because molds do release chemicals as well.
Okay.
So if you think about mold as a grass growing like a patch of grass, and it has roots that grow out, and it's feeding on the soils. Well, in a building, they're going to feed on cellulose materials, paper, cardboard, wood, and
water.
They need water to grow, and they need water to be able to feed into that substrate, and they're going to change the starches into sugars.
Okay.
So that's what they're feeding on. They will pop up out of so the essentially they're feeding into that material, so not just on the surface. You know, when you get a block of cheese and there's mold on it,
most of the time,
just right
unless
on the surface.
You get it
You've
really,
got to cut
really
off
quick.
Half an inch.
Yeah.
You know, to get because the roots go down into that substrate. And the same thing with molds. And when molds start to mature, when they mature or when they start to dry out, the mold will produce fruiting bodies, the stems and the seeds, and those seeds would be the spores. So those spores then, when they're dry, they're easily discharged off the surface by movement or air currents, and they float around the air. And they're 3 to 5 microns in size, sometimes even smaller. So a lot of them, you can't see them. A lot of them will pass through regular air filters. So if you're vacuuming and you're using just a regular collection vacuum, it's going to go through the bag and back into the air.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So
a central vac out in the garage would be a little bit helpful?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, or discharging to the outside, or a vacuum cleaner that has a HEPA filter on it.
Okay. So you can get vacuum cleaners with a HEPA filter.
Yeah, a HEPA filter is an acronym for high efficiency particulate air, and that removes dust to 0.3 microns at 99.97% efficiency. So if you're vacuuming with a HEPA filter, you're capturing all those fine respirable particles.
And then throw them out.
It's in the bag.
That's what I mean. Get rid of them.
Get rid of them.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you have mold spores in the air, it can affect upper respiratory. When molds are growing, they release a gas. So you're a mold on your territory, and I'm a mold on my territory, and I'm going to release this metabolic gas that helps to suppress you coming into my territory.
And likewise.
And some of the gases that are released are toxigenic. So not all molds we can smell. You know, people will often associate molds with a musty odor when they drop into a basement.
Yeah.
It's not always mold. It could be bacteria. It can be just stagnant humidity or moisture. So just because you smell a musty smell doesn't mean you have
So must doesn't equal mold necessarily.
It can't necessarily.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a good thing to know, because I tell you, when I'm out showing property, immediately that little sniffer goes, oh, let's get out of here.
And that's right. And people are leaving because they think it's got to be mold, and it is not always.
Wow.
It just may be a lack of air circulation in the basement and maybe some accumulated humidity.
Right, because that happens a lot in basements with the air falling, the heavier air going down to the basement, and therefore the moisture builds
so you're going to have, the prime season for mold growth in a basement would be summertime, when you have high relative humidity and lack of air circulation.
Right.
You could also get mold growth in the wintertime from condensation on windows. And you can get, the other issue that's not often seen a lot is mold in attics. Out of sight, out of mind. So you've listed a house, you've sold the house, the building inspector comes in, everything looks good in the basement, they open the attic hatch, and now they're seeing mold in the attic.
And that's pretty dangerous too.
Not really, because the reason the mold is there is airflow up into the attic. In the wintertime, you have this stack effect of heated rising air, and it condenses on the cold sheathing. So if you looked this time of year, when it's cold, you would see frost on the underside of the sheathing.
Right.
It's only until that frost melts into the wood that you have the moisture content above 20%, which allows the molds to grow until it dries out. And the airflow is always from the house up into the attic.
Oh, okay.
It's very, very rare that you would have airflow back down. So molds in an attic are not an air quality issue.
Okay.
They would be a cosmetic issue.
Right.
And possibly a structural issue from the delamination, and the molds are weakening because they're weakening the wood. So it might weaken the structure. So you still want to stop them.
Right. And so how would you stop something like that in an attic?
Well, a lot of building inspectors will talk about ventilation. And ventilation is only one part of it. The second is the moisture source. So if you don't have air leaking into the attic, you will never get the frost, and you eliminate the moisture source.
But won't you always have air leaking into the attic?
You can always have a small amount, but if you have bathroom fans that are separated, then you're going to get a lot of moisture up in there.
Unless they're vented right out.
Unless up and out. And now it's been quite common to vent into the soffits.
Yes, it is. We're seeing a lot of that.
And the problem with that is that the soffits are designed to allow air to flow back into the attic.
Not out.
Not out. So you can get patches near that soffit area. And if you go into older houses that might have had a vinyl siding added in the 70s, and the soffits were not cut completely open. So now you have a lack of ventilation. You might put a new square louvered vent on the roof to increase the ventilation, but if you don't open up the soffits, you're not getting that ventilation. So the ventilation will remove little bits of humidity, but if there's a lot of humidity, it's still going to condense on the sheathing.
And the amount of insulation you have in your attic
doesn't affect air leakage at all.
Okay, now explain that one.
Well, because air leakage, air moves through fiberglass insulation. So if I'm looking for where the air leaks, if I have a bat insulation, the square bats, I can lift them up and you'll see track lines underneath the insulation.
From the moisture.
From the air collecting dust. So it's acting like a bit of an air filter. So maybe around where the vent stack of the plumbing goes through, or on the top plates, you'll have these black lines. It's not mold, it's just dust. But it shows that needs to be sealed to stop the air leakage, which is creating the mold issue.
Okay.
So it's a combination of things. You have to increase the ventilation. Adding insulation won't stop it, won't stop the air leakage.
Okay, they're kind of two independent
conversations. Yeah.
And so venting right out the roof or anything makes way more sense.
Absolutely.
And then the second thing I think I heard you say, and I'm sure you all picked up on it, was sealing everything.
Yeah, so you have not only the air leakage can create the mold issues with the moisture, because when we're breathing, there's moisture in the air. If that's leaking to the attic, it's going to reach the dew point on that cold sheathing, but you're also losing heat.
Right.
So adding more insulation isn't really going to help that much with heat loss when you have this air leaking.
Okay.
And if you can picture where electricians will run wires, so you have a switch and the wire goes up through the ceiling into the attic and down again. Well, every place where they drill a hole into a cavity space, it becomes a little chimney.
So how do you fix that?
You have to move the insulation back and use expansion foam. Just foam and seal, tape and seal. Depends how well the vapor barriers are done.
Okay, so then that will alleviate the issue. It's the whole sealing thing that just isn't done very well often.
In some situations in older attics that don't have any vapor barrier, it's a good candidate to remove the top layer of insulation, do a heat lock foam spray, just a thin layer of foam spray, because that's a vapor barrier and it seals up every perforation hole. You would cover over electrical boxes and bathroom fans with plastic first, so
Right,
you're not,
and
then you do the heat lock spray, and then you can do more insulation on top.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're just joining us now, we're on the inside track on real estate, everything real estate, and today we're talking everything mold with Paul Battle. So if you haven't heard the first half of the show, you want to go back because it was a lot of really interesting facts and helpful information for homeowners, whether you're looking to buy a home or whether you're just living in your home now. Tons of really good stuff. So we're going to continue on the theme of mold. If I walk into a property and it's got some mold, and now we already talked about that moss doesn't necessarily equal mold. However, I can see some mold. I can see a little bit of black on the walls downstairs. Should I run?
No, you shouldn't run.
Should I call you?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. You can expect that you will get some mold growth on surfaces, especially low down in a basement wall, just from because that's usually a lack of ventilation or circulation issue, where you have warmer air at the ceiling, and as you get down, it gets colder and colder. The air condenses, the relative humidity goes up, and you reach dew point. A lot of houses don't have insulation in that bottom 12 or 18 inches, and that's to allow heat to escape in the winter time so your frost doesn't affect your footing. So it's protecting the footings. You don't want to insulate it in an older home, but what you do want to do is make sure that you have air circulation going. So no, you shouldn't run. You can clean it off the surface. You can use,
and is it only on the surface, Paul, in that case?
Well, that's where you would want to make sure that's a case. So you can take baseboards off. You can look at carpet tack strips, those little tack strips along the edge of the walls. They are very fast at absorbing moisture and growing mold, and they're right against the concrete. So if the tack strips are rusty, that shows moisture, or if there's mold on them, then you're going to cut a hole in the wall and look in there. And maybe that's the time to call me.
Okay.
At that point. Yeah.
Perfect. So I shouldn't necessarily run.
No, not at all.
It's pretty normal, in fact, to have mold in every house.
It's normal to have some mold in every house, and I could almost guarantee I could find some in pretty much every house.
Okay.
An outside closet where there's lack of air circulation. So that's the key is if you or I have a bunch of clutter in our basement and we're not managing it properly, we've created a mold issue.
Okay.
So it's stacked against the outside wall, especially in a corner where there might be a downspout on the outside. There's going to be almost always mold there.
And what do you do specifically, Paul, to find mold?
Well, the first thing that I do when I enter a house is to do a quick walk around. And using sense of smell, because after about 20-30 minutes you equalize with the odors in the house. So using sense of smell is one little tool.
And some molds don't smell,
and some molds don't smell.
Okay.
Give off an odor that we can detect.
Right.
And then the second would be to use a flashlight, a good strong flashlight appropriately. So I know that I'm going to be going into exterior walls and into closets, and if I illuminate that wall directly onto it, I'm going to wash out the colors. I might not see it. I mean, if it's a black mold, yes.
Yeah.
But there are white molds, there's opaque molds, there's a lot that blend in with the color of the wall.
Okay.
If I hold that flashlight sideways, right against the wall, I create a shadowing effect so I can illuminate them and see them a lot easier. Okay. So you can go into a basement and it looks completely nice, and you hold the flashlight against the side of the wall, and people are like, oh my, look at that. Like the whole bottom 2 foot all the way around is full of mold.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
And then so that's a physical. So that's a physical side. There's also moisture testing. So we have meters that will show us the moisture content in a wall structure, both in that surface and behind the wall.
And do you use the moisture method every time you're looking for mold, or do you first look for physical evidence?
I would first look for physical evidence, but then I'm always backing it up with moisture tests.
So what if there was no physical evidence? Would you still do a moisture test?
Yes.
Okay. So
so you're still scanning under windows and in areas where it can absorb, and we know the general what the moisture content should be.
Right.
And there's a significant difference between dry and that will produce mold.
Okay.
Like 20% moisture content.
Right, that's the big thing we're
versus
looking
3
for.
or 4%.
Right. If you find it.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to find in every house we've addressed. So if you find something that's of significant concern, what can be done?
Well, the next step would be to determine how much is there, because a lot of the guidelines for mold removal are not necessarily with the type of mold, but how much is there. So if it's above 1 square meter, then there's the potential for that to, when we're removing it, to create air quality issues. If we're seeing a significant amount of mold, we would want to do some air tests to get it to determine whether it's just in the basement or is it being transferred through the ducting system, through stack effect of rising air into the rest of the house. Okay. Because that's going to dictate, do we need to clean the upper floors? Do we need to flush the air out? You run HEPA filters. There's a lot of different types of tools that we can use. Okay. So is it just cleaning it off a surface, or are we having to go behind the wall? So that's where we start to do some test cuts.
Okay. Now, a lot of times I know my clients will ask for inspections from your company. So I'm assuming primarily you're doing real estate inspections prior to the purchase of a home, or are you doing just as many once somebody is actually in the home?
Just as many for homeowners.
Okay.
Now, so most of my work is all referrals. So, people be talking and saying, oh, everybody's coughing and sneezing. When we turn the furnace on, then they'll say, well, call Paul. But yes, a lot of my work is through real estate. Okay. So some of it is pre-listing inspections now. I'm starting to see that a little more. I'm also, I do a lot of troubleshooting, so they've already had a building inspector in, and the building inspector suspects problems with mold, then they're calling me. Then I'm the specialist for that. Yep. Yeah.
Perfect. So can you remedy all mold, or?
I would say yes, at a significant budget sometimes. So there are situations where an entire, let's say in a grow-up,
yes,
with a grow-up that has been sitting dormant for a few years because of the bureaucratic situation process, then that leads to the effect of a lot of mold growth, and at that point you're going to have to take all of the drywall down in the house,
and maybe even into the studs,
into the studs. And so in most situations that's extreme.
Right. That's a grow-up issue.
That's a grow-up issue, but and not to say that all grow-ups are bad.
No.
But
aren't they?
Maybe
I think they're all illegal.
They're all illegal, yeah. I mean, 8 years ago I would have said, no, we can easily fix them. Now with the length of time that the bureaucracy takes, I'm finding a lot more problems in them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the cost, I'm assuming, I'm putting you on a spot here, varies greatly from next to nothing to an exorbitant amount of money to remedy a mold issue.
Yes. Yeah.
Is there any guideline you can give somebody? Or?
Well, it depends on if you're removing a patch of mold underneath the window in a basement, then it might be $800 to $1,000 because all you're doing is a small containment area, and it's easy to contain. But if you're doing a larger, around the entire basement, then you've got contents. Sometimes when contents start to get contaminated, that's when the cost goes up. Okay. Because the companies are having to come in and clean all of the contents before they can even tackle what's in the house.
And can a homeowner do their own mold remedy?
Sure, they can do small. Yeah, they can do small amounts with guidelines and training.
Okay, is it just putting bleach on the stuff?
No,
I just hear all these things.
Right? A little bit of knowledge is dangerous, and they need to have the right tools. But I get asked that. I work with clients that are the people have the tools or they rent them, and I'll provide these are the details on how to do it.
Right, because you don't do the remedy of the mold.
I do some, but small scale, and I don't have a lot of time to do them. So
you're doing mostly inspections.
I mostly refer to other companies that do professional removals.
Okay, and you do professional removals as far as you do them.
Yes.
It's just the smaller stuff.
Smaller scale, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So if the homeowner was going to do a little bit on their own, they would need to get information from where? What sort of source would they?
Well, CMHC has very good information on their websites on mold protocols. Canadian Construction Association has mold guidelines. Environmental Council of Ontario has mold guidelines. So there's plenty out there on the web. They can do lots of research on it. Or they could hire a professional and be directed exactly for that situation.
Which makes probably the most sense.
Yeah, usually it's safer to do that.
Yeah, it is. So in terms of somebody connecting with you, Paul, how would they go about doing that? If they have a need, or they're listening today and they're thinking, I wonder if I have some mold, or they could even walk around their house quickly with a flashlight against the wall, and if they see pretty flowers all over the place, they know they need to call you.
And it's not the wallpaper.
Right, and it's not the wallpaper.
Yeah.
How would they reach you?
How would they reach me? Probably the best way will get through my website, thehousedoc.ca, and that'll give them links to my email and my phone numbers.
Okay, so that's nice and easy.
Yeah.
Good. So if you're joining us today on the Inside Track, we've been talking about mold with Paul Battle, the House Doc at thehousedoc.ca. And I just want to feature an awesome property that we have on Lena Avenue in Manotick. And it is $735,000, a beautiful, well-built house with an amazing garage. So if you're the guy with the cars and the hobbyist type stuff, you've got room for minimally 5 cars. It's a triple car wide, and then it's basically double deep with an access to the lower level. So I've heard there's been as many as 7 cars in that property. There's also a great in-ground pool, which you'll enjoy in the summertime. Probably not great for skating on the winter, but really, really nice. And it's on the North Island in Manotick. So if you're interested in that property or any others, you know how to reach us, 613-860-4663, 613-860-HOME. And it's one that you or your friends may want to take a peek at. So call us or connect with us on the web at deckerteam.com. So Paul, what is the one thing about mold that you want to leave the listeners or the viewers with?
I guess the big thing is there's a lot of sensationalism out there regarding mold and the health effects of molds, and a lot of companies try to scare people into purchasing products or cleanings. There's some very questionable business practice going on with people inspecting and trying to sell cleaning. So
yeah, I've seen a lot of that.
Yeah, be aware that mold is everywhere. You only really need to do some basic things to stop it in the house. So don't panic about it. There's a lot of stuff you can do, and buying a house that has a small bit of mold in an attic or down in the basement, it's not a deal breaker. It's easy to fix.
It's normal.
It's normal.
I'm even hearing you say.
Yep.
It's almost you should expect it.
Yep, you should expect it. Yeah.
And so if you have questions or you want to hire Paul, go to thehousedoc.ca. I thank you so much. It's been an incredibly informative show, Paul.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us on the Inside Track on Real Estate. And thank you for joining us. If you have questions, then you know what to do. Send them to deckerteam@chri.ca and we'll get those handled for you. And if you have mold questions, Paul's got lots of great material and links at housedoc.ca. Have an amazing day. Thanks for joining us.